Well, welcome back and welcome to the book of Hebrews. We're moving through Hebrews this year. That's our 2026 project, is to walk verse by verse through this book. And it's been, for me, great. I hope it's been great for you as well. Very encouraging, filled with important exhortations to continue on in the faith and not give up and not grow weary. We're going to be in chapter 6, verses 9 through 20 today. And we just saw one of the most sobering warning passages in all of Scripture in verses 1 through 8 of this chapter. Now the writer is moving not to leave his people in a state of dread and alarm, but rather to give them encouragement, establish them in the faith, give them encouragement to go on and be grounded in God's faithfulness. So the structure of the passage, I'm not going to read it because it's pretty long. Let me just switch over to there so the words are on the screen. It comes like this. First came the warning. So we saw that in verses 1 through 8. Then we see reassurance in this chapter. And then, in this section. And then we're going to see confidence in his readers. So as we go through this, so these verses have that shift from danger to hope. We want to finish in hope. Believers persevere only through exhortation, but also through being relying on God's graciousness and faithfulness to us. So let's dive right in. This is a long section, so it begins with this word of confidence in verse 9. Notice he calls him beloved. Beloved. We are convinced of better things concerning you, things accompanying salvation. So after this really stern warning, he assures his readers, he calls them beloved. His concern is deeply pastoral, I think. He wants them to continue on, and he's confident that they will. He's persuaded that their lives demonstrate that they have the things that accompany salvation. In other words, very plainly, their conduct shows evidence of genuine faith. So you might ask yourself, what are these concrete expressions of faith and love that he sees in them that makes him convinced that they're believers? Well, in Hebrews 6:10, he's going to talk about the practical care of fellow Christians. They stood by and didn't distance themselves from persecuted Christians. Their community is characterized by sustained service to one another, public courage, sacrificial solidarity, and really joyful generosity. He sees all these things, and as we go through the rest of the book of Hebrews, I'll point these things out. The verse reminds us that the warning passages in Hebrews are meant to spur us on to exhort toward perseverance and not to any way undermine our confidence and our hope and our trust. Verse 10, we see again what we've seen earlier is the dependence on God's faithfulness. God's faithfulness. He said, "For God is not unjust to forget your work and the love which you have shown toward his name." So see, here's some of the evidence that we discussed. It's the character of God that he's resting on. God's not going to forget. God's not going to forget what you've done. It's important to remember what this verse highlights, very important truth, that God takes notice of quiet, faithful service done in his name. You don't have to be in a pulpit. You don't have to be in the front of a classroom. You don't have to be in a stadium preaching the gospel. You could be in the quiet of your own living room praying for other brothers and sisters. You can be just quietly helping a believer that's in need, giving them money, giving them practical help, perhaps just calling on them either on the phone or in person to just cheer them up. God never misses any of these things, and he will reward you for all of them. Verse 11 then gives the desire of the writer. We desire that each one of you show the same diligence so as to realize the full assurance of hope until the end. So he is His passion, his burden for the people that he's thinking of, speaking to, writing to, is that they continue in this diligence. And the reward of their diligence in this life is going to be full assurance of hope, full assurance. Path faithfulness accompanies, is the result. Full assurance today is partially the result of path faithfulness. So I think we often talk about the assurance of our salvation. That assurance is primarily a result of what God has said in His Word. We depend on His Word and what He promised us to never leave us or forsake us. But I think there's also this subjective sense of assurance that we have when we see ourselves growing in the faith, when we see ourselves serving as the Lord Jesus would serve others. It's as we persevere through difficulties, in the Christian life. All of us have those. So all these things contribute to our sense of assurance, and that assurance builds in us hope, and hope continues to the end. That's what he's desiring here, is this hope to continue to the end. Go down to verse 12 now with me. The verse tells us that he has an example for us of faith and patience. Be imitators, he says. Be imitators of those who through faith and endurance inherit the promises. You know, examples are very important. Examples are extremely important in our life. He's going to give us an example in a moment here of Abraham. In chapter 11, he's going to give us a long list of examples of persevering faith as they waited patiently for God to fulfill his promise. We have around us alive today, perhaps even in your own church, your pastor, some of your elders. I pray that they are exemplary men, worthy of emulation, worthy of imitation. We have 2,000 years of Christians. Some have been very notable in their faith. I've just, in a series right now, reading a series of biographies. I've got time, so I can do that. But a biography that began in Reformation England and continues down to today, a series of men who have been extremely faithful. William Perkins, the original Puritan in England. Martin Lloyd-Jones, Charles Spurgeon, Samuel, I can't remember his name right now, Samuel Cotton, so many others, G. Campbell Morgan, so many others that I just, people I'll never meet until I go to heaven, people who have gone to heaven way before me, and nevertheless, they serve as people that I can imitate in their faith, in their perseverance, in their unfailing love for God's people, through ups and downs, accusations and slander that they've had to endure. And these kind of examples are important. That's why in verses 13 and 15 gives us this example of Abraham. Abraham is an example of patient perseverance. He had these promises from God. God swore an oath to him because he had no one else. He swore by himself. He gave him this promise. And now he waits. Abraham waits even to today. Abraham is going to see the promises of God made true. He's going to see that those who bless Israel will be blessed and those who curse Israel will be cursed. He will see the nation that God raised up from him. He will see these things because he yet lives. And he's going to witness the fulfillment literally exactly as God promised them. So he's an example that God's promises on the one hand are certain, but their fulfillment often requires patient endurance. And we need to learn that. don't we need to patiently endure? Verses 16 to 18 then talk about the certainty of God's promise. The writer is explaining here that human oaths confirm a promise and settle disputes. In a similar way, God confirmed his promise on an oath so that believers might have strong encouragement. And let me just expand on that a little bit. I wrote a book about Lord and land, the sovereignty of God and the land of Israel. Talks about God's land promise to Israel. And when God swore that promise, he swore an oath by his name. He had no one greater to swear by, so he swore by himself. Which means that if God does not fulfill that promise, just as he made it, not in some spiritual sense, but in a literal sense, if God doesn't fulfill the promise he made to Abraham, then he is not God. He is inconsistent with his character, and he lied, and he misled, and that is not our God. That is not who he is. So we have strong encouragement to take him at his word and to wait faithfully. So believers, we can take refuge in God. Verses 19 through 20, our hope is ultimately anchored by Christ in the Holy of Holies. We have this hope we have as an anchor of the soul, a hope both sure and reliable, and one which enters within the veil. He's talking about the veil around the Holy of Holies, that the high priest could go in only once a year. Where our high priest is in that Holy of Holies, he's anchored there, and we're anchored to him. So we have this anchor of our soul and this ongoing hope that is going to go on. And then the imagery shifts, as we say here, to this nautical, as an anchor enters within the veil. So this is the root and ground of our hope. Our hope is secure. Our hope is rooted in Jesus. Jesus is rooted in God. He is God. So nothing's going to fail that he's promised us. We just need to be patient and persevere and hang on. So I think several important truths emerge from this passage, things we can apply to ourselves and think about. First is perseverance grows from confidence in God's character. We have to trust him. We have to rely on him. We have every reason to do that. We have hundreds, literally, of fulfilled promises in the Old Testament, prophecies fulfilled, and hundreds more. And as long as we are waiting faithfully, we will not be left without hope. That is our hope in the future, that God is going to continue to fulfill his prophecies just as he promised that he would. Second thing we learn from this, and we can apply to ourselves, is faithful service matters. Acts of love, acts of ministry, these are evidence of real faith. They're remembered by God. He sees every one of them. They're remembered by him, and he's going to reward them. And finally, something to think about for yourself is hope as a stabilizing force. Hope giving us stability in the Christian life. Things around us may change drastically, ups and downs. We see, as I record this, a horrendous war going on in the Middle East right now. It's having an impact on the economy around the world, as well as security in the Middle East. All these things go up and down. But we know God's promise. We know, and we're anchored to that promise, that he will bless those who bless Israel and curse those who curse him. We have these promises as an anchor for our soul, and they give us stability in rough seas. So this passage is both encouraging and again challenging. Continue to persevere, continue diligently. Don't become spiritually sluggish. Follow the example of those like Abraham, who received God's promise, trusted in it, and waits even now patiently for its fulfillment. And above all, brothers and sisters, fix your hope firmly on Christ. He has already entered the presence of God on our behalf. He's there. We're anchored to him. We're secure. God bless you.